Hello, this is Anthony. Let's walk and talk. So today we're going to talk about numbing and dealing with difficult emotions. You see, I think most people think that when it comes down to the aspect of numbing, they think of the typical things that most people would consider numbing. Alcohol, drugs, things like that. And sure, those are coping mechanisms. Those are things that people use to numb themselves out from the emotions that they need to experience or life. But numbing comes in many forms well over the forms that we just named, the things that become or tied more to the aspects of addiction. No, numbing is the willful ignoring of difficult emotional things that require processing in order for you to continue to be, or to become a functional and a healthy human being. So let's talk about what are those aspects of numbing? What are those things outside of drugs and alcohol that aid us in numbing from the things that we should be processing and healing from, releasing from? Well, I'm going to name a bunch of things here today that when I name them, you're going to say, no, that's just living life. But then when we talk about the reasons why, it's going to become more apparent that it is actually numbing. Now, the biggest one that I think outside of alcohol and drugs that people talk about is, and I would tie you those to parting, is workaholics. You see, workaholism is a huge numbing agent. It is an addiction in and of itself, but the reason it doesn't get mentioned is because people always tie it to trying to improve yourself or benefit yourself. But the reality of it is when your entire life revolves around work, what you're actually doing is you're running away from all of the personal things in your life that you don't want to address. And you're disguising that fear of feeling those and processing those emotions around your ego in terms of accomplishment, in terms of acquisition, in terms of, or under the guise of I'm bettering myself, or I have to make enough money, or I can't pay my rent, or I want to improve my lifestyle. But the problem is that these things, again, they're very egoic, and they lead you down a road to something that you can never attain, which is happiness and satisfaction. That's an illusion. You see, we've talked about this in the past. Anytime you are tying your self-value, self-worth, happiness around things or accomplishments, the ego is not going to let you rest on your laurels very long. The moment you get to that point where you achieve that thing, your ego is going to say, okay, that was good for 30 minutes. Now let's move on to the next thing. Or, I got here. It was easier than I thought. Maybe I didn't set my goal high enough. Let's go on to the next thing. And this is the exact mechanism that the ego uses to continue the aspect of numbing. Another underrated numbing mechanism, what some people would call retail therapy. When you have to go and buy the latest and greatest, or buy the newest clothes and the newest fashions because they make you feel good. Well, here's the problem with retail therapy. Again, unfortunately, it's very egoic. It locks you into that your happiness is tied around things. And so you'll go out and you'll spend money, in some cases money you don't have, to buy things to maybe make yourself feel better, or maybe, like an outfit that you like that makes you look better, and that's all fine and great. But then a couple of days after you buy it, you have one of two reactions. Either it just becomes another outfit in your closet full of outfits that you already don't wear, or B, you have buyer's remorse, and you're like, well, maybe I shouldn't have bought that, maybe I'll return that, and you'll obsess over it. See, the problem is that already most people, when you open up your closet, you have clothes that you probably haven't worn for a year plus. But we don't want to go through the process of purging those things because we tell ourselves, well, we may need those in the future. Well, why don't we go through the process of purging those things? Because we've used those things to numb. And purging requires reflection, and reflection requires dealing with emotions, and dealing with emotions requires healing. So instead of purging things that have been in the closet forever, people just continue to pile things in the closet. Shoes for me and my former self was an aspect. Many people choose shoes. I don't know why. I had like 36 pair of shoes at one point, or 37 pair of shoes. I could have worn a different pair of shoes every day for a month and a half and never worn the same pair of shoes. And then when you recognize really what that is, that for me, that hoarding was more of a way to create an illusion of stability. Well, if this pair of shoes runs out, I won't have to buy another pair, even though I had 3 of the same pair of shoes. So I know that a lot of people fall into that category. A lot of people fall in the category of outfits, dresses, pants, shirts. It's all the same illusion. Another very underrated one that I'm probably going to get pushback on it, but series, movies, and television programs. Huge numbing tool. Why? Because what it does is it helps you to forget about your life by having you imagine somebody else's life. You watch a movie and you idealize what happens in the movie because you're too afraid to face the things that are preventing you from making your life better than the movie. Give you an example. Going through difficult times, instead of sitting down and processing the emotions, sitting in silent, dealing with the things that come up so that you can overcome the things that are preventing you from having the life you want, you just turn on a TV show and you watch it and continue to watch it. In some cases, many people, I've seen this happen, they'll watch a TV show until they fall asleep. Because if you watch it until you fall asleep, you never have the come down of, oh, I didn't deal with this. Oh, I need to deal with this. See, this can be for everyone. I've even been guilty of this at times. You're going through a difficult time. You process emotions throughout the day, and you say, okay, I've done a lot of work today, so I'm going to just zone out into a movie. But when you become more self-aware of what's happening, you can watch the movie. But then after the movie, what happens is, it's almost like you're paying the debt for watching the movie. You've put yourself in a position where you've stepped away from the emotion, but then if you're conscious and you don't need to heal from the emotion, it comes back even stronger. So instead of just continuing to watch until you fall asleep, you end up having to deal with certain aspects of it before you sleep, or else if you have a mind like me, and I know a lot of people do, where you overthink, you'll just run through that whole egoic pattern in your head all night. Now, the value of dealing with a lot of these emotions, especially from trauma in the past, is that at least you're starting with a clean slate. So when you learn to do things like meditate, and you learn to control your mind, at least when those times come up, you can deal with the emotion and not allow the mind to run with it, which allows you actually to be able to deal with emotions more rapidly and then fall asleep. So when you wake up the next day, you're not carrying that same energy into the next day. You've been able to release what you needed to release the night before. You see, these are all aspects that the ego does not want to deal with. And the reason why it doesn't want to deal with it is, and it doesn't want to deal with the flow of the emotion, is because dealing with the flow of the emotion requires you to look at self. It requires you to change your story. It requires you to deal with things that your ego wants to label or tie you into. I'm a victim. I can't change the situation. This is too difficult of a trauma for me to deal with. These emotions weren't my fault. They were somebody else's. I didn't do anything wrong. It was the other person. It takes takes away your ability to be accountable. And if you take away your ability to be accountable, you're taking away your ability to actually deal with the aspects that you allowed, meaning attracting the same partners, meaning attracting the same situations that you choose to ignore because you numb, and you choose not to hold yourself accountable. You see, as you move through these processes, in some cases you almost become over accountable. Say you find yourself in a relationship that becomes difficult. When you become over accountable, you say, you know what, I take accountability because I recognize I allowed this in my life. And when you start taking that accountability, what happens is, instead of blaming yourself, you start to look at the things where you didn't love yourself enough to allow certain behaviors into your life. This is also revolves around being able to create boundaries. When you deal with these emotions that come up, then you are less likely to say, hey, I'm going to be flexible on this boundary. Because what happens is, hey, when I deal with these emotional things that come up, they're not fun. And so I don't want to continue to draw in people or relationships where I know the end result is going to be, I'm going to have to sit with this and heal from it, and that isn't an enjoyable experience. But sometimes that takes going through multiple situations and relationships to get to that point. But in order to get to that point, you have to recognize where you're numbing yourself from feeling those feelings, where you're avoiding your accountability, where you're avoiding emotions, where you're avoiding accepting responsibility for your part in these actions, where you're accepting responsibility for your emotions, and where you've held on to things and not dealt with them in order to release them and allow yourself more understanding and love for self and accountability for your life, where you've essentially allowed yourself or continue to allow yourself to become the victim as opposed to taking the power that you actually have. But what say you? How do you feel about that? I know there's a whole bunch of other aspects of things that people do to numb, but I thought I would name out a few that seemed to me obvious, but maybe aren't obvious to others. As always, if you enjoy this content, please like, share, and subscribe. Even on a day like today, I am truly grateful. And until I talk to you again, peace, love, light. Hope you have the most amazing day.